Well, kia ora everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of the 1 Minute Mentor. Just before we start, a student asked me, "Hey, Will, why is your podcast called the 1 Minute Mentor when it's 1 hour long?" And I said to them, the truth is, I just like the name, 1 Minute Mentor. And they said, yeah, but you ask us all the time to have a reason behind why we do stuff. And I said, yeah, that's true. So I thought about it quickly and I thought maybe if you watch this podcast, you'll take a 1 minute mentor clip away from the stuff we talk about. Anyway, I want to quickly go around the room to say hello to my guests tonight, to please ask them kindly if they could introduce themselves, where they fit into our universe, and then we will see where our kōrero takes us. Simon, maybe I can come to you first.
Sure. Kia ora, Will. It's so good to be here. We've known each other online for a long time. So it's really nice to be here in the flesh. So my name is Suitauloa Simon Young. Together with my wife Marie, we run PEP, Pacific Enterprise People, and I'm also passionate about ancestry and family history. So I'm also running a startup called One Ancestor. Yeah.
Kia ora, tārawhalawa. My name is Salā Marie Young, and we're a husband and wife team. And as Sui mentioned, we're really blessed to actually work together and really help equip our Māori and Pacific anyone really with a purpose, and that comes in different forms of whether it's in governance and leadership, or just really looking at individuals or organizations that are really honouring their past and acknowledging where they come from, acknowledging the planet, the whenua, the land, as well as people. At the same time, looking at innovating and how can we sort of encourage our young people to continue to innovate for our next generation.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You told me offline that 27 years married. I'm not sharing anything that's not allowed to be shared. I just can't help but think how cool that is, because most people I know that have been married 27 years are really old, but we all look around the same
We're secretly
age,
really old,
so
actually.
It's like, that's the secret to staying young, is it, to be married 27 years? But I guess I'd like to ask you both around the role that you've played in each other's lives around mentorship, because
cool.
I think it's really cool to be married for a long time. This year will be my 20th year married.
Awesome.
And I thought I was hitting a home run, but 27 years, I'm a baby. But I guess, would it be okay to kind of frame up, this long relationships you've had? There's obviously ups and downs like we all have, but I love the idea that you've done nothing no different to what everyone else can do, to find someone to love them, and that can be a mentor too. Does that kind of spark anything when I speak?
Yeah. I've been very, very lucky, very, very lucky indeed, and blessed. And I think we definitely mentor each other, and we've learnt to have a relationship where we really listen to each other. Hasn't always been that way. 27 years is a long time. But the way, especially that we work together, and sometimes we ourselves wonder, we live together, we work together. There's not many parts of the day where we're kind of separate, but we don't, sometimes we meet other couples and they just kind of need each other in small doses. And we are not at that stage. And at this moment, it's kind of feeling better and better. And I don't know how to unpack the layers of that, because as I say, it hasn't always been that way. Yeah.
And as you can see, we're a mixed couple. So I'm Samoan, New Zealand born, but pretty much grew up in Samoa. So I had some exposure to, primary school. So that's where I picked up the language. So it was, that's a blessing in disguise. And so I'm able to actually, speak in our reo, in our ngana Samoa. And so I think there was definitely, because we met at a radio station. So I was a receptionist and Sui was a copywriter. Yeah. And so we sort of they said they used to say court, or used to sort of be, sort of girlfriend and boyfriend for 4 years until we actually then got married.
We were just friends for 3 of those years.
For a long time. Yeah. But definitely was, I think for the culture side, it was, we were attracted physically, but I think for we have a lot in common. So we can talk about,
Yeah.
we can talk about movies, and like we are open-minded about each other's interests, and
Yes.
so we try to move in the middle to compromise
so
rather
true,
than
yeah.
sort of have a closed mind about, I'm not interested, and so I don't want to be open
We're
to
both
that.
very curious, yeah.
Yeah.
And you actually ask, and this is why you're doing a doctorate, I reckon, because you've always asked very high quality questions, like massive questions, but you'll just ask them offhand and be like, and I'll be like thinking, yeah, why does whatever the question is? And I think, yeah, definitely. And the fact that we are cross-cultural and curious, because we met cross-cultural couples and it's like they just stick to their corner, but it's like we both are reaching. So, for example, we used to go to a lot of churches that were mostly Samoan people, and that is a full immersion kind of experience. We now go to a Palangi church, like it's pretty much only Pākehā, and Marie is reaching across to understand more of that's a distinct culture, even though it just sees itself as mainstream. And I think that mutuality of like, we're always trying, I guess, but doesn't feel like a hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the best work, right? Where it doesn't feel like hard work.
100%. 100%.
And it's not how we would normally talk about marriage or relationships, but
Totally.
I often think about that. My wife's German, and so there's like this whole difference in culture again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it always keeps things interesting, sometimes in a
Definitely.
good way, sometimes in a strange way, but it's like you're never bored because there's always something going on. But,
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated with how, I guess, call it, divine intervention or chemicals that match. But like that's the true kind of secrets in life, right? That you can't really explain it.
Yeah.
It just happens. And I guess maybe that's a topic we can talk about. Like, have you both found it hard to navigate in this world where some of it's feeling based and others kind of it's more academic, and I've been really trying to find that balance because now that there's this thing AI around, it can really strategize anything for you.
Absolutely.
So what bits are left that we've still got to be humans, and it's like we're thinking ourselves out of everything, and I'm guilty of that. But maybe Simon, for you, I guess, how do you navigate the kind of feeling part of who you are versus the analytical part? And
yeah, interesting. I've become a lot more analytical as I've gone. So I left school at the age of 18 and just didn't go to university, just kind of forgot. I didn't know what I would study if I went. So like I broke that drought at the age of 47 and went back to university, or went actually to university for the first time. And that was just after Maria had done her master's, and I'd kind of been vicariously like looking over her shoulder, and it introduced me to academic rigor. I already had a pretty good mind, and I'd been a journalist and kind of knew how to do facts, but not at the level of rigor that's expected, where you just got to back up absolutely everything you say. And it's been really helpful for the way of thinking, the way I think. Because the other thing is, I used to be very vibe oriented, and I don't want to get political. And I've seen the rise of Trump, and my vibes are like, this is not a safe person to be around. Like, just when I used to watch The Apprentice, I go, this is not a good leader. He's pretending to be a good leader, and he is intimidating people into making him think that he's a good leader. But then I see a lot of my fellow Christians really go after him because he's saying some things that they like. And I'm like, they're going off their feelings, their gut feel, maybe a few Bible verses here and there, and they're forming a whole picture of reality. I'm going, oh man, that's really dangerous. So that's probably sort of put me more in the analytical camp.
yes, interesting.
Yeah.
Trying to kind of balance that.
100%.
Yeah. So I guess what feelings do you trust then?
The feelings that come with good research. I do sort of think that I do really believe in intuition very strongly, but I guess I just weigh it up with everything else equally before, and this is true in business as well. just doing a year of law was really helpful for the way I think about business, because I've sort of realized for everything, it's like, oh, listen to the accountant, read whatever you're given to read. And there's so much material that you actually need to run a business. Read it all, like really get to know it. So intuition is part of the data set. It's not the whole data set.
Yeah.
Whereas before it used to be like, I feel really strong about this. That's enough. Let's go.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's kind of the thing you can do when you're young. You got lots of energy to waste.
Yeah.
But when you're like, I turned 50 this year, and it's like, okay, intuition says this, all the data. And what I love about AI is that I can ask it really good questions, because before I would think of the question and they go, that'll be too hard to find out. But now it's like, no, the whole wisdom of the world is waiting for me to ask the right question.
Absolutely. Marie, how does your mind talk to your heart, talk to your gut, and in reverse?
Well, I think as we get older, without giving out our ages, I used to, when I was young, I would be called like an activator. I would just, when it feels good, when I believe in it, when when it's like, there's a character in the Bible called Peter, and he was just the first in anything Jesus says. He's the first, so he's one of those guys that would just say, let me try walk on water, because I've just seen you walk on water. So I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to give it a try. And then he fails miserably in front of, the whole disciples sort of thing. And I used to be like that. I would just be very impatient, frustrated by certain things. And I think never sort of look into like the data set, or have a read of it, consider, be more measured, things like that. And I think also my background, we were often a family that would react to a lot of things, so often we will be moving around, and so at very short notice we would have to actually pack up and move household.
Yes.
Often people would just, when you hear a family that would be planning, okay, next 6 months we're going to be moving.
Yeah.
Well, for us it will be in the next 6 hours we're going to be moving. So I think as I look back in hindsight, I was one of those kids that was always hyper vigilant. So I could be sitting here in this podcast, but I part of me is
where are the exits?
I'm scanning what's happening outside, who's in the vicinity, what's going on here, and then sometimes I'll say to Simon, did you notice the lady with the red shoes on the way in here?
Yes.
And he's like, what lady?
You would make such a good detective.
So I was, because when you're in an environment that you were out of control, you're a young person, and you're just having to just figure out how to survive, how to move fast, how to react. So I sort of picked that up as I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so I was bringing that into my young adult life. So planning for me was unheard of. It's like, when people sit down and go, what's your 5-year plan? Or what's your meal plan?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I'm just surviving, because, I don't know whether we're going to be in that suburb or in a moment's drop of a hat, we have to move.
Yes.
So I found that there were certain skills that a lot of my, I don't know whether you call it fight or flight, like what I think I've had to learn that as I've gotten a bit older.
And I guess there could be parts of that you use in your life to, I guess, those coping skills and may be able to harness in some ways. But I guess, do you have any tips for those who maybe had to stay in overdrive mode just in case? Like, have you been able to experience, and can you share things about what it's like to go to the other mode? The rest and recovery, we don't even have good words for it because we don't use those enough. We have the words like hustle and grind.
Yes.
But we don't have it at the tip of our tongue of what's the opposite, They don't sound kind of cool.
Chill.
But chill, And I mean, and maybe I'll frame it up like this, I'm in this kind of season. What I love about entrepreneurship is it gives me an opportunity to have a good go. And, I guess to expand more, I was the opposite kid to you. My world was slow. I'm the youngest. of a second marriage by 10 years.
Wow.
So I was the spoiled baby.
Wow.
And I was my auntie's favorite because I'd eat the most, and that came back to haunt in different ways, but we're all on some type of journey with that. And I guess I could just chill, and I never knew that the world expected me to get up and do stuff. So it bit me late, and I kind of shared a little bit about my journey with when my mum passed. That was the bite to her gift. Last gift to me was the rocket of ambition.
Wow.
Because you got to get busy living.
Wow.
You got to get busy doing. And I think what's interesting is that now that I've seen that, I want to really chase that, but I only want to chase it so that I can go back to, I want to know what it's like to wake up one morning and all your bills are paid.
Yeah.
I wonder what that's like.
Yeah, nice.
And I wonder if you've experienced that. Maybe not all your bills are paid forever. That's I don't know if that's possible or not. I've met people who have had that happen for them, but at a cost, I guess. I'm not trying to do it at a cost to myself or others. But yeah, so looping back around, what does a chill day look like for you?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think because I'm in my 50s now, and when I was describing how I was obviously 25 years ago, when I was 25, was completely opposite. And I think there's the good and the bad that comes out of the being reactive or having to be super vigilant, and it doesn't sort of bode very well with your nervous system, because you're constantly tensed up because you're trying to survive in your environment. So the opposite, I think for me, it's like, I think my faith and prayer, some people will call it, they journal their prayer or they meditate, or because out of the moving, I didn't realize that in hindsight, I really loved education. I really, really loved school. And I got frustrated as a kid, and then I became quite angry as a kid because I just wanted everybody to just stay here for a longer period of time. So I could selfishly, I suppose, as a kid, focus on my studies, but when there's a lot of things that you can't control because we're at the mercy of our caregivers or parents or whatever, because they're trying to survive. And we don't, I didn't really understand, because I'm just a kid, what the parents are going through.
Yes.
So, so I think coming back to your question is really, I really thank God, because it's my faith. I didn't realize that when I was, because I talk to myself, I visualize a lot, and then I didn't know that, that's manifestation, or that's positive thinking, or someone will say, hey, that's discernment, that's, that's God, that's faith in action. So whatever you want to call it. And so I was always that type of kid that when I would be in a pew, because I was picked on a lot, I think I've mentioned this before, we were live recording, I was picked on a lot at school. So when I would be just in the pew and the music was on, just the music, I didn't even know what the preacher was talking about. I wasn't really into the preaching, but it was the music. It just really transcended myself into that sort of peace, if you like. It's really hard to explain.
I know, I get what you mean.
Yeah, where I don't have to be like, I'm safe. I didn't even know that. Now being in a safe space is a thing.
Yeah,
but back then, in growing up in the 80s, and just coming into, it doesn't matter whether it was a pew at church, but I was just like, I'm safe, and I'm just being blessed by this beautiful angelic music, like, this organ, old school organ, and all the Samoan sort of harmony, sort of really blessing my soul. And so I guess that for me, if that makes sense, is my faith in God and what Jesus means to me. Because for whatever reason, I gravitated to that, because there was nobody else at the time anyway that could understand me.
Yeah, I have never thought about music as a mentor. And of course I'm putting quite crude things together, but I am only doing it because sometimes going too deep, everyone's like, what are you talking about? We have a bad habit, especially in this country, and I guess I think because I was raised in that way where if I didn't talk to my Palangi dad in a certain way, he wouldn't get what I mean.
Right.
Because we don't talk deep and meaningful. He's like, how's work? And I say, good. And he's like,
great conversation,
yeah,
bro.
you know. And it's so strange because it's kind of taught me a little bit how to navigate in different spaces. My mum, we could articulate and really go into it. But my dad, it's like, I didn't tell him I was running a business for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Just because I was like, I know what he'll say. He'll say,
how much money you're making?
Yeah. And, you got to look out. It's all about the future, sustainability.
Oh,
and I'm like, yeah, I agree, Dad. But, I kind of watched you travel through some spaces where you weren't kind of doing what you thought you should, and you were suppressing that in different ways, so I like the idea that sometimes you just got to show, not tell.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
it's certainly
true.
been an interesting part. Simon, if you think about the kind of people in your life who have popped up when you need them, maybe we frame it as mentors, is there images and memories that come to mind? Because I guess what I don't want to do is that a mentor something special that no one can get.
Right, yeah.
And that actually, if you don't have that, you're no different to anybody else. But I like the fact that life might provide that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting journey for me. So I lost my dad at quite a young age. I was not even 4 years old when he passed away. And I kind of normalized that. And one time we were talking about a lot of the trauma that Marie had been through. And then I said, compared to you, my life is, I just lost my dad. And she goes, wait a minute. That's quite a big thing. And I think part of me for all my teen years and early 20s and 30s, probably into my 40s, I think when I would think of a mentor, I would be looking for somebody to completely take care of me like a father.
Right.
And therefore that's an unrealistic thing to ask of the universe, because there was a certain amount of growing up and looking after myself that I needed to do because now I find mentorship everywhere, all around me. And so I wrote a book called Reboot Yourself, which is sort of a self-help book for people who are skeptical about self-help books. And I guess without saying it, one of the messages of that book is that you are if you write down something that a smart person would say, you'll probably write down something pretty smart because you're pretty smart. But often we kind of limit ourselves, especially if we've done some dumb things, and I'm a dumb guy, I don't know. But then it's what would a really smart guy do? Oh, probably this smart thing. I'm that's, self-mentoring, I guess. I think also there have been people in my life who have sort of played that mentor role. I think there's an inverse relationship with how much they want to be called your mentor and how much benefit you actually get from it. Often the people who don't intend to be your mentor have a big impact, for me anyway.
Yes.
So I think of school teachers. I still remember my history teacher, Mr. Pipe, in high school. Had him 2 years running, just embodied history. And I love history to this day. He lived and breathed that subject. When he saw there was a book on a subject that he felt was biased, so he dressed up as the other side in this conflict that we were looking at and role played so that we could get a balanced sense of what was going on. I was like, wow, this guy, man.
Just went all in.
Totally, yeah. And there was nothing, that was just an example, not a mentor. But I realized that that's the kind of mind that I've got. When I pay attention to something, I really pick up a lot. But also, probably like a lot of us, I have a defense mechanism when something's directly aimed at me, like the "don't tell me what to do" kind of instinct.
Yeah, I wish I had a bit more of that sometimes. Just oh yeah, cool. Marie, you mentioned something about the red shoes before, and it got me thinking. I can hear maybe a cleaner somewhere in the building.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, okay, please don't turn on the alarm. Do I have to get up and shut the door? Do we just roll on? Do I even talk about it? And it's interesting how we're all kind of built slightly different, right? I hear those things and I don't know why I do. I think I've tried to analyze myself to be like, when you meet me in person, I'm quite big. And some people,
surprisingly so, I've got to say.
And I think that's probably why I'm better in person, which is why my podcasts are in person. But I have thought about, I've always kind of felt gentle, but I think I sometimes look quite menacing, you know, and you can't help how you look. You just are who you are. And so I think what happened is I developed something where I have to somehow get a expression across to you that you're safe. And
Yes.
so I'm always overthinking things, like I don't like that I couldn't find the light when you were coming in. I was like, oh, they might think this is creepy, So those are all happening in real time in your mind, and it's very interesting. I mean, do you relate to that? Is your mind always kind of
Yes.
scoping out things?
And it is the cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's good. So we
Totally.
can, they can hear us. They'll probably be deciding, do I vacuum or not? Just carry on. It's all good. We'll use AI noise cancelling. Yeah, I mean, does that happen for you where you can feel your mind? Has it has it been a superpower? Do you sometimes have to learn how to turn it off?
Yeah, I think it can be, I was saying a pros and cons. I think sometimes all the things that we think, gee, that's a mistake, or I went through something that was challenging, and that's all negative. But yeah, I'm a firm believer now that as you get a little bit older, hindsight is beautiful.
Yes.
Hindsight is just such an amazing mentor, because you can sort of almost freeze frame. And when you have that self-awareness, when you're open to just going, oh, I see where I was, or you can see how I reacted or not. And then you can, it can be a gift, because it can transition into everything that you can do. In my work now, I'm so grateful for all the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to just mention, I just don't want your listeners to think that we have a perfect marriage.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Because I think in the beginning it was very
Fraught.
very, very tumultuous.
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Yeah.
you have to. There's two people in a marriage. You're trying to figure out who you like, what you like, what
Who you
our
are.
interests are, who I am,
Yeah.
versus then you're having to share your whole life from yourself.
Let alone the separate cultures.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you've got the different cultures and our families and traditions and language, and so all of that. So I think for us was like, oh gosh, it's hard work, But I think for grace, I think the grace that God gives us, we're able to be gracious. When I make a mistake, in the early days, I would always say, you do you. But now I'm learning to actually say, this actually makes me feel like this. Like I own it first. Like I start by saying, this is, that thing that you're doing, it actually makes me feel this way. So I'm not sure whether you notice. So it's a little bit of more grace that we extend to each other.
Yes, that's right.
A bit more kindness but I start off from myself to actually then say how I feel, rather than, because we never used to be like that, eh?
No,
we'll be
that's
like,
right.
You did that.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Then you'll be doing the same.
A lot of tension, a lot of am I going to blame her first before she blames me, kind of thing? Yeah.
I should we just let you guys do talk? No, I'm being silly. But I guess the question I want to ask is, you want to acknowledge that, and I totally understand that, because we get into this habit of making things look perfect. But I also kind of want to maybe suggest that, it's probably more good than more bad.
At the moment, absolutely. Yeah, very much.
I guess that's the beauty of time.
Yes.
I think that would be a fair metric. Is it more good, more bad?
Time and some key decisions. Yeah, like decisions. Do we keep going? Do we try and go our own ways? And it's like, I'm really glad that we keep going.
And just, I think coming back to why, our why, like our, this is our purpose. This is, what is that purpose? Why are we put on this planet for? And, life is often just, it's very fleeting. We were at a funeral today. It's been a full day, but it was a beautiful celebration of someone in their 90s. And, so we learn a lot from we were privileged to actually just be in the, vicinity of this 90-year-old, but we don't really know him until we actually were sitting down and listening to all the different, reflections of what others were saying. So I guess that's why for us is that just deciding we're deciding that we're going to journey through this life together. It's a short one, it's time is, I can't believe I'm actually, well, we're both in our 50s, so
yeah, I do. I know what you mean. Yeah.
It's like how I don't feel the number,
yes.
but I guess it just makes us really appreciate, being grateful. Like when we wake up in the morning, we're just like, wow, thank you, God, we've got a roof over our head. We can actually have a meal, that we can choose to have a coffee. We can go down and buy a coffee, small, medium, or large, or even soy milk if we want to. Just those little things that just like, I'm so grateful, So it's like just, being appreciative of the little things.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one of the things that I'm experiencing is because I was the youngest. I was always the youngest.
Yeah.
But I'm finally not feeling like the youngest because, well, you grow up.
Yes.
And then you have to like start putting things in order, And I'm actually really enjoying that coming into my mid-40s because I also feel like people like to give money to people who are older. Like I had entrepreneurial ideas when I was 20.
Right, yeah.
But who wants to do that? I mean, now you'd call it a tech founder or something like that,
Yeah.
But maybe you carry yourself slightly different and you maybe your ideas are slightly more refined, and that's not because you're awesome, it's just you're a bit older too. And so maybe can we talk about being your authentic self? And I know that's a very loaded word, especially with our internet, and authenticity and blah, blah, blah. But I guess what I'm kind of enjoying about my 40s is I'm just kind of like, who I am. And now I've just got to I got to do those things that are of who I am. And I've got to be in those spaces that will allow me to be that.
Yeah.
And if I can't be in that, then I guess I have to make a decision, either put up with it or get out of there. And in the past, I've put up with things, but now it's like, I don't think it's cool being a grumpy 45-year-old because you don't like your manager.
Right.
It's a bit embarrassing, I would rather be a motivated 45-year-old who needs to make it work because you're the breadwinner, and that really gives you that. It helps guide me a little bit, and I got to make sure I don't go kind of too wild for that. But maybe coming back to you, Simon, like how do you go about being the true you? And are you?
Good question. And which me do you mean? Like, because there who was I talking to the other day, and I was saying, sometimes I'm a Labrador, often I'm a Labrador, and Marie is a Rottweiler sometimes, in terms of how the mode that we can activate. But there is definitely a Rottweiler side to me, and it's surprising often to me and to others, and it's not often seen by others, but that's definitely part of my authentic self. And so I think sometimes I'm a youngest child as well, and we get used to presenting a certain side of ourselves to the world. And we were doing this exercise in our Pacifica workshop the other day where we were helping people get prepared for running for office. We had photos of like Einstein, genius. One single word goes with that guy, but there's so much more to Einstein than just being a genius. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. And yet there was so much layers and depth to him. And so for me, it's appreciating that I'm allowed to be sometimes angry, sometimes really impatient, and also friendly and very understanding and all these kind of things that people might know me for. And that's all okay. And also, just as you were kind of saying about, you kind of calibrate yourself to not be a threat. Yeah, as a man, I'm aware of that. As a white person in a brown world, like we're often working in Polynesian spaces, and I'm aware that there's a whole layer of preconceived ideas that people might have about me. And the Pacific, or the Samoan culture anyway, is humility is very highly valued, even to the level of physically going to low and lowering your head so that it's lower than the other person. Things like not eating, standing up, that kind of thing. I've absorb that, and perhaps sometimes when I go into a predominantly Pākehā, I've got to return on that confident swagger that is also authentically me, but it's like sometimes it's like, wait, where did I put that? And as switching between can be, sometimes I'm putting on the wrong mode for the wrong situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally hear you, and I guess that's what I've been trying to work on for years now. Monica, my wife, would say, your podcast guests get such a lovely version of you. You're articulate, you care about them, you're making sure they feel safe. Bring some of that home.
Oh my gosh.
And that hit me at the guts, But I have been trying to be a version of me that would be suitable everywhere.
Yeah.
So maybe that can't be a true me, but it is a okay me for everywhere. I'm just exploring that,
Yeah.
So if I'm in school, I'm because you think of yourself in a certain way, and I'm like, oh yeah, they like me because I think they like that I turn up and I speak a certain way. Then I watched a video of me. I'm actually really assertive.
Right.
No, we're doing this.
That's cool.
You have to do this. And,
that's cool.
I'm trying to guide their energy, and at a certain time, being their pal. But I was shocked when I watched me.
Wow.
And I don't have a outcome. I just think the student will decide.
And when you're doing that, what is it that makes you so assertive?
I think because I've thought about it that in some ways as a podcaster, you hold energy.
Yes.
Because I could easily shift a few things and you will all of a sudden think, I don't want to do this anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. But my whole goal is to hopefully you're like, oh yeah, that didn't really make sense. But once we got into it, it started to feel right. And I think kind of life's like that, it's like a faith almost that, or a spirit that we will bring it out.
Yeah.
But I can't really describe it. It has to be.
Yeah. It's the right thing for the right time.
Yeah.
It's like Batman's utility belt.
That's right. Wow. I'm Batman. Look at me.
Be yourself, unless you can be Batman. Then be Batman.
So, it's been an interesting journey, and it continues to be, and I thought, bringing up that idea of your authentic self, because, again, everyone, it's all kind of good when the wheels are turning, but what happens when the wheels fall off,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think maybe that's what we don't appreciate sometimes, is that the wheels have fallen off for people, and we're still asking them to be their authentic self, but they're in crisis mode, critical
That's
mode.
true. Especially kind of like what I was saying before, and what I cover in the Reboot Yourself. When you've stuffed up, how do you still be friends with yourself and kind of forgive yourself and understand? I guess because usually, like, nobody is like, I'm going to really stuff up my life today. Everyone's like usually having a good idea or what they think is a good idea, and so how to make peace with that person.
And when you talk about that, obviously we should go and read your book, but what is the answer that you came up with?
Oh, the 3-step answer is read the book. It's actually been ages since I gave my book recently to a mentee, and she was like, wow, this is an amazing book. And I'm like, I really should read it again because there's so much I've forgotten. But it kind of follows the 12 steps. So I did a lot of research into 12-step programs. And the good news I found was you don't need to have an addiction to benefit from the 12 steps. And the first step of that is actually acknowledging that you're not in control. Your behavior or your patterns are beyond your management, and it's reaching out to a higher power. And it's I love the fact that it's not prescriptive. You've got to believe in this particular God, and because that comes with a whole lot of baggage. But it's like whichever way you can conceive it, something that's not you, that you can actually let go to. And then there's a lot of steps that include making peace with yourself, articulating what it is that you've done that violated your own sense of right and wrong. That's really helpful. At the same time, so there's those 12 steps, but then there's also the 12 steps of the hero's journey, which is all about kind of stepping out of your normal world and into this place that does go pretty dark sometimes, facing the darkness in yourself, like in the sacred book of Empire Strikes Back. Luke Skywalker is fighting, like, he gets what he wants. He gets to fight Darth Vader, and then that mask pops open and it's his own face. And it's like, oh boy, that's such a telling scene, because that's really the journey that we all take. Yeah, we've met the enemy and it's us.
Yeah.
I've often gone through times where I'm like, man, I'm the smartest dumb person that I know, and I'm the dumbest smart person I know.
That could be a clip for social media, eh? It'll go. That's awesome. Well, I wanted to float something with you both, if you don't mind. And thank you again for just being open to, I guess, exploring through this conversation. I've been thinking about appropriate places for young people to be mentors. And I know we don't normally think about it like that. But I guess we would say, young people have their role and it's well defined, but I've been kind of trying to challenge that because we live in rapid change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our young people are adapting to that and being forced to.
Yes.
And I think that's why they take the brunt of, first of all, they're being measured more than our generations were. So there would have been probably, I don't know what the stats would be, but because their generations are being measured for mental health and, all of these things, it's like measured to death almost, And I guess I wanted to try and find ways where it's appropriate in this modern world for young people to be the mentors, to be the leaders. And so I'll float an idea with you. I've been, and I know this kind of overlaps into some of your work, Simon, but been, I guess, at a deep level, interested in podcasting as a way to preserve stories. I think it's interesting that my 400 podcasts, some of them online, some of them not, are an archive for my kids to hear their dad, hanging out with people he doesn't really know.
Yeah.
But actually found that I built all my friendships in my adult years through this medium.
Wow.
Adult years, or maybe just my, mid-20s to now. And realizing that it's interesting that it was never about, for me, going and putting it online and being Joe Rogan, even though back in the day I liked that kind of idea of being able to be online. I don't really like it these days, I know that we still find value in, like if I just said, hey, come all the way out to Pookie and we'll just chat, you'll be like, can we do it during the day? But because we have the added cameras and whatnot, we can, it is still a little hack for spending time together in our very busy lives. So I like the idea there's a knowledge preservation part, and then I thought, maybe that could be a role for our younger people to play, where it is already kind of expected that they will know how to open the banking app, that they will be able to do this. Why can't they be in charge of helping preserve the family story? Why does that have to be always the elder doing the family tree down? Why can't it be the bottom up,
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to float that idea because I think it's a very interesting one. I am aware that you came from a funeral today and that sometimes all of our resource goes into that side of things, right? Like now we'll bring everyone together, and I wonder, what is a compelling enough story to tell young people to say, you could be helping preserve along the way? And that would be a way for you to connect with your elders in an appropriate way, a hierarchy-free way, where it's not at battle with set-up systems, and that, most elders would probably be happy to share the story and for you to be listening. And that if you told them to record on a phone, most of our, nanas and papas would be like, oh, I'm not touching that, regardless of ethnicity, So maybe, Maria, I can ask you, does that make you think of anything when I'm talking about this role for our youth?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just love what you've just shared. I know that when I was growing up in Samoa, my grandfather, he was just this big, amazing, superhero to me. I'm sure he wasn't a perfect man, but I just wish that I knew him a little bit more. I wish that I would have conversations like how we're having these conversations. I saw him from afar. He was a member of parliament at the time in Samoa. He was an entrepreneur. He had so many different things, more than just one initiative going. He was always community-minded. And I also then found out that on my dad's father was a judge. So I've just learned about them through secondhand, clippings, or they didn't have social media back then, so you've got to go to archives and, newspaper clippings. So I really would, for me, if there was a thing back then that I could use to just capture some of those moments and have those conversations, I would definitely jump at it, because there's such they're definitely mentors for me. when I read about them, when I hear about them. But I would just absolutely love for young people, especially because we're oral, Māori and Pacifica oral cultures. We learn by serving, and often that when we're doing something, when we're doing it live in real life, we're told off by the aunties right there and then. So we will definitely learn right there and then. But it's in a space where we understand that that's how our elders are correcting us to do it the better way, to the proper way, and that's how we learn. But yeah, that would be such an amazing tool to give, and especially I think I can only speak for myself as a young person looking back, and I think, well, if I was speaking to myself then, and if I had the tools, because obviously I didn't have the tools, and then to know for me that 20 or 30 years later, I would treasure that moment, freeze that moment in time. And I just think that, I think maybe perhaps the framing of it, or the purpose of it, or the reason why our young people would then, if they were sort of given the narrative, in 2010 or even 10, 15 years time, and, this project would, get you closer to that moment. It's almost like, it's probably not I've got an idea that's coming that's not really a good example, but it's when you're sort of like preempting, like for our young people, we're here today, but it's almost like preempting for the next,
That's right.
couple of decades down.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think if they have like a really clear, understanding, or a powerful why, a powerful treasure, that they will then come to later. And perhaps they won't have the orientation now, but I'll give almost anything. Most of us would give anything to have a coffee or a lunch or the last meal with our grandparents, or it doesn't have to be a grandparent, but that particular special auntie that I had, who was, how you have that auntie or uncle, that one that was always in your corner. And I had an uncle that in Samoa, he would go to the downtown in Apia, and he'll come back in the bus, and every single time I knew he would come back with a little brown bag, and it had like the round pancakes that they make. And you can tell that he's purchased it for a while, because the oil has now sort of come through on the bag. But it was those little things. When I talk about it, it really just transport me straight back into that moment.
Yeah.
And I think it would be such a powerful, even for me just to explain that, really, I'm already there. I can see him walk all the way to the house with my little brown bag of pancakes that I will then share with my cousins.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love for our young people to, and perhaps it's something that they, rather than us telling them what to do, perhaps co-designing and asking them how they would like to preserve. Because I would love to be part of that conversation if I had the chance.
Yeah. Lucky I've got you both here. Maybe those can be, these collabs we talk about, right? And maybe it's like, I think that is definitely the kind of spaces that we should be trying to do. And there's a funny thing about, because, there's this whole funding thing in Aotearoa, and it puts everyone in corners again, and bubbles, and it's like, oh, you get it for this and only for this, you get it for that. But it's like, why can't we be exploring?
100%.
And
we saw on LinkedIn the brother Akare taking Pacific funding, but giving services to refugees, which was so good.
100%. And you're just making me kind of think too, Marie, about, we really have to try and push hard, because that story you just told of your uncle, this might be one of the only digital archives of it.
True.
And it just happens to be that it was in our chat. Now, that is very risky for our knowledge and identities. AI might find this for your family in the future.
Right.
And be like, oh no, we do have a small trace, but it's 10 seconds of a 1 hour podcast.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
The oily bag.
Another bag.
And I think that would be a worthy task to say, how can this stuff be not left to the sands of time,
Absolutely.
So it is an interesting one. I think it is correct in some ways that we don't dwell on all those things, but I would like a little bit more dwelling sometimes,
heck yeah.
Yeah.
if I can
Absolutely.
get a couple more podcasts in the bank with my mum, What good is 400 podcasts and I only have 2 of her?
Right, yeah.
I'm exactly the same. I would trade them all.
Yeah,
I would love to have 400 podcasts now,
absolutely.
And so I guess, yeah. But Simon, I know ancestry and knowledge
Yes.
is a big part of your story. I know it's part of why I have been connecting with you.
Yep.
Because I felt like who else to go to than the person who's already been doing it,
Oh, thanks.
And so I guess why are you so passionate about making sure things aren't forgotten?
I think so. There's a bunch of origin stories for one ancestor, and one of them is obviously the death of my father, and that we weren't that close with his side of the family when I was growing up. So that sense of a missing piece of half of me, kind of thing, and also that there was. Mum was a bit of a hoarder. We had quite a messy house. And so there was also always the possibility that the family tree document was somewhere in the house. And I would be like tearing things apart trying to find it. Couldn't find it. When I was 30, we had a family reunion in the old metropolis of Te Kuiti. And then I went down and my uncle was leaving town. He'd retired from the family accounting firm. And he said, you know what? There were copies made for each of my dad's brothers, but this one never made it to you. Here it is. Here's your family tree. And it was like, wow. I was like a kid in a candy store. It was this whole pile of papers. And it was really cool stuff. It was like the history of the Youngs showing their descent from Charlemagne the Great and William the Conqueror. Like, wow, man. And this was 2004. So we didn't have that much information online. Like there wasn't ancestry.com yet. There was Wikipedia for the famous names. So I started to research who these kings actually were. I didn't know that much. And I was like, oh man, these are terrible people. These are horrible guys, but I'm related to them. Okay. Braveheart was one of the movies that made me want to learn about my Scottish history, only to find out with this family tree, I'm related to the bad guy from Braveheart. Edward Longshanks was like
Dark Heart.
I'm a direct ancestor of his. Like, oh my gosh. So partly the fact that it was kind of impenetrable was like names and dates. And I realized that in school, I hadn't paid attention when we were learning about European history. It didn't seem to be relevant. And there wasn't much detail. So there wasn't stories to go with it. So partly there was just a passion for it to be as good as Braveheart. That was the bar that was really high. So there was that. The second half of that is when Mum passed away in 2022.
Yes.
And we were living in a messy house at that time. And so we had a sorting table because we're going to sort this stuff out and we're going to have to figure this out. And it was so much stuff. Mum had kept all the greeting cards from her 21st in 1959, and they were in mint condition from people I didn't know who they were. And I was like, should I keep these? I can't keep everything. And so I had to throw away some things, had to keep other things. And we had to sort through everything because nothing was kind of grouped together. And so there was one pile that could have gone out, but I had to sort through everything. And there was a letter from Dad's employer when he died to Mum. And it was, there's this whole cliche of like, on their deathbed, people don't talk about how they should have worked more. It's always about time with family. But as a man, coming into a man's world and a working world, I wanted to know more about what Dad was like as a worker. And here was Michael Horton, the co-founder of Wilson and Horton, where Dad worked, saying, Graham, my dad, when he came into the office management role, he turned around the profitability of our magazine division. I was like, what? Really? Wow. It was so empowering. And I'm like, this is a precious object. I wish that there was some way of preserving it in a meaningful way, because then I did started to do my master's study, started to be a customer of all these ancestry, my heritage. They're okay, they're okay for research if you're trying to break through what they call a brick wall, because it's connected to thousands of births, deaths, and marriages records, but there's no sense of who was this person?
Yeah. There's no oily paper bag.
There's no oily paper bag, exactly. There's no storytelling. And so that's kind of the gap that I'm trying to fill essentially with One Ancestor. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's a whole podcast series.
Oh my
on
gosh,
that.
totally.
I know you do
totally.
your own recording, so I
Yeah.
hope that excites some people, including myself, to keep in touch with that journey. I guess I just want to be mindful that you both are coming from West Auckland and we are in the deep
Mighty West.
south. So
Oh, good.
we're coming up to 1 hour, and I guess I will start to wrap up. But I wonder, something I've been asking people lately is when I interview them for either work or podcasts is, you probably had some subconscious thoughts about what our chat might be today. So you might have been just preparing in the background. What had you prepared that I haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about?
Nice.
Because I wonder, Simon, you're a deep thinker. You probably had run the algorithm in your brain.
Yeah.
What haven't we talked about that's worth bringing up?
Yeah.
Either as a preview to another podcast we can do, but also just to leave people with a bit of food for thought.
Well, this actually came up in the conversation tonight, and that was when you're talking about authentic self, and it connects with whakapapa and genealogy as well. The more I get to know my ancestors in depth and stop seeing them just as a name on a tree, but look at their photos, look at their lifetime and go, what did they do? I don't know how scientific it is, but it's like the genetic memory of what they did lives on in me. So I've got in my ancestry military commanders. So when I'm having a day where it's hard to get organized, I'm like, remember that major general who commanded a whole platoon, or a whole battalion. I don't even know what size, but within me is that potential to command an army. Within me is that potential to teach at university. Within me is that potential to organize and administrate. I was quite surprised to find a lot of administrators in my background. I'm a creative guy, but it's like, cool, let me tap into that energy that's coming from my whakapapa.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Within you is a bulldog.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What about for you, Marie?
What an amazing question. I was just thinking about the Pacifica, which is what we're wearing on our. You probably noticed on our clothing, and I think it's been a real project for us because we saw a gap when we attend our community meetings, and especially in our Pacific space, where often we're dissatisfied or complaining about, how local government or even the current government of the day is, and we were just stirred to actually do something about it rather than just be like sort of the tail end of what the stats often say about Māori and Pacific, especially when it comes to democracy and understanding how the machinery of civic leadership or anything like that to do with our people. And so that's what as I thought I just wanted to mention, because I think in the next 20 years, I mean, Māori and Pacific, the population is just going to go through I don't have the stats, but I don't think we really need to know with the recent census that come out. So we thought we'd just bite the bullet and create this initiative for our community.
And that was one of those moments where we went all with the feelings.
Yes.
Because we had planned to do it. We were about to announce it. And we thought, we don't know what to charge for this. And in the moment,
yes,
we both decided, let's do it for free.
Yeah.
Let's make it available for free.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we were just like, no, we've got to do this for free. And I think it's for us, it's just that we wanted to be part of the solution, just to really prepare our younger generation, our young people, just right through to anyone that's willing to want to learn the mechanism of what do our local boards do, how does that impact our communities, how can we start a pathway where we can empower and just come together, but bring our worldview, like bring the way that we talanoa or do our kōrero, or just in this very relaxed way, but learn often the resources are there. We've been really, really fortunate to be being sort of like partnering with the Electoral Commission. So we get resources, 'cause all the resources are out there for our people.
Wonderful.
But then it's like curating it in a way where, similar to what you're doing, you're facilitating this conversation tonight, and we're able to elaborate, from a sense of purpose. And I think for us, purpose is really important. What is our why? What do we do? And often we find ourselves doing things when we see just frustrated with things, and rather than complain about it, what can we do about it? So we're on our fourth.
Yes, 4 out of 6 weeks.
Yeah, 4th out of 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's basically just learning all the things that our Auckland Council has on, but then just we take it, we turn it around, and then we just repackage it, reframe it in the way that it's digestible. We don't have to sort of go through lots of words. It can be fun. We have a meal together, so where everyone's relaxed. And then at the same time, we're sort of like hitting, some really like robust modules that we've come up with a curriculum. So it's 6 weeks, and we're in our 4th week up.
Yeah.
And we've just attracted incredible lawyers, young people that are community leading.
Yeah.
They see the chasm between community and local board and families just surviving, so that why would they be interested in local boards? But then bringing the reason, for voting, for registering. So we're doing all those things that we normally see the yellow voting sort of envelope comes in sort of, but sort of understanding sort of this is actually quite a powerful thing, to be able to vote in this country, and what that means. So
beautiful.
So this is the project that we've got. So in only 3 or 4 weeks, we've got one running. So they're going to run for a local board in Mangakiakia.
Yep.
And then we've got 2 that's preparing to run in the next
local election.
Yeah. And so it's a pathway where we're just preparing our peoples, because we just don't see enough of our representation.
Absolutely.
So, and our vision is that we would like to equip and empower our people to prepare for the first Pacific Prime Minister in 20 years' time.
Wow.
Yeah. So even that, like even saying it out loud, being able to declare it out loud. And so we shared it only twice in community settings. And then that's how we've got registrations just coming through, resonating, from all sorts of age groups.
Wonderful. And it might be sometimes life pushes you around, right? And the fact that you're out these ways is interesting, because Franklin is, I think, the second highest population of our Pacific peoples.
Yes.
And that is a commentary on Auckland, or I guess the city of Auckland becoming a pressure cooker and pushing. And I know our local boards out here, I can't even think of one Pacific person on our local Franklin boards. The closest we've got is Akaray, and he's not even in there, but he contracts to them and is pushing very hard for our local area. So, look, I guess within our chat, I just want to say thank you to you both. I was a little bit intimidated, because, again, when I follow your work, it speaks to people who are connected, are staying connected. I've, watched a little bit of your journey when you were getting your title and stuff like that, and seen bits and pieces over the years. And obviously, I think we connected when my mum passed. I might have put a post up, and
that's right. Yeah.
And that was, you reached out, and I guess I just want to thank you for giving me grace to, on my journey, I won't do all my little things perfect. But I think, the intention is fair, and just to have a chat. And I like how we've weaved back and forward through some topics, and I think they'll allow our mind to continue thinking, and that's the whole goal for this. If you can have the gift to sit down and talk, which is what I also believe our ancestors did.
Yeah.
They had time where not everything was business. It was, let's sit around and ponder. In fact, I think it was we like to think about the voyagers and navigators, but they probably sat for weeks talking about, hey, what do you reckon if this thing happens?
Yep.
That won't happen. Just ponder or podcast like we do
100%.
before they set sail. And maybe that's the rubric we could have our lives too, that we'll talk a lot and we'll think and then we'll go and do. And thank you both for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you in person.
Likewise.
And I look forward to many more adventures before we all get too old.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the work that you do and the mahi that you do. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome.
Yeah,
your
such a
audience.
thrill to actually meet you, Will. Yeah.
Cool.